I'm a 29-year-old woman, and if you met my family, you'd probably think my older sister Charlotte is the star of it. She's 31, works as a social worker, and has the kind of personality that fills every room she walks into. I'm a marketing consultant. I prefer plans over noise and results over attention. That difference has always been there. She thrives on people's reactions, and I work quietly until the job's done. Our parents, Helen and David, call her the people person. They say I'm the steady one. It sounds fair until you see how praise gets divided. Charlotte tells one moving story, and they beam like she cured the world. I land a major client, and I get a polite nod and a white. That's nice, dear. It's always been that way. 2 years ago, I bought my own apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I like calm spaces, a clean kitchen, and evenings where no one's interrupting. Charlotte calls it lonely living. She says it with a teasing laugh, but she tells others she worries about me being isolated. Somehow, her pity stories always sound noble when she tells them. She has a habit of retelling things that happened, small family moments, work updates, childhood memories, but in her version, she's always the one who fixed everything. If I repaired Dad's old laptop, Charlotte encouraged me to try. If Mom finally took my advice about her fundraiser, Charlotte made it happen. It's not lying exactly, it's rewriting. She smooths her own reflection into every story until no one can tell what's real. When I got promoted to lead a statewide marketing campaign for a regional chain, I was proud. It was the first time my work would be public, with my name attached to the results. Charlotte congratulated me like she meant it, then started talking about ethical storytelling and how she could help me shape the message. I didn't ask for her help, but she started acting like part of the team anyway. At a family dinner, she told everyone she was helping Isabel with the ethics part of her project. I corrected her lightly, saying the company had its own ethics consultant, but Mom waved me off, saying I shouldn't sound so defensive. The table moved on, but the damage didn't stay there. A few days later, one of my clients asked if Charlotte's role in the campaign was official. That was when I realized her stories had traveled beyond family chatter. I called her afterward and told her not to represent herself as part of my work. She smiled through the phone, saying she was just proud and that people like a sister success story. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. Then it escalated. A small local blog interviewed her about community work, and she told them she'd recently advised her sister on an ethical marketing project. They printed it word for word. My boss forwarded it to me with a polite question mark. I had to explain, send internal records, and clarify that no outside consultant was involved. It didn't ruin anything, but it made me look careless. When I told Mom about it, she sighed and said, "Charlotte only wanted to support you." Dad stayed quiet. I realized that in our family, Charlotte's intentions always mattered more than her impact. That night, I stopped explaining and started collecting. Every public post, every quote, every version of events where Charlotte turned herself into my partner, I saved it all. It wasn't about revenge. I just knew that if this kept going, I'd need proof of how far she'd stretched the truth. For the first time, I stopped trying to correct the story she told about me. Instead, I began preparing to tell my own, one that didn't need her edits. The next few months were quiet on the surface, but I started keeping a private record of everything Charlotte said that turned my work into hers. Every post, comment, or text where she found a way to slide herself into my story went into a folder. I didn't tell anyone about it. I just wanted proof of what was happening in case her imagination spilled into something that mattered. Not long after that, I got invited to work with a nonprofit on a community marketing campaign. It was smaller than my corporate projects, but more personal, focused on helping local small businesses reach people online. It was my first time working outside the usual corporate space, and I liked that it was something I could own from the start. The press release hadn't even gone live for 24 hours when Charlotte posted online about it. She shared the nonprofit's announcement with a caption about how proud she was of her little sister for finally joining the causes we've always cared about. It sounded harmless, but within a week, the nonprofit's director emailed me, asking if Charlotte would be joining our strategy meetings since she seemed to have a strong background in outreach. I spent that afternoon fixing confusion that shouldn't have existed. I replied politely, saying Charlotte wasn't involved in the project, and thanking them for asking. Then I posted a short message on my professional page, thanking collaborators by name and making it clear that I operated independently. I didn't mention Charlotte, just facts. That evening, Mom called. She said my post sounded cold and that people might think I was ungrateful. I explained that it wasn't about feelings, it was about accuracy. She sighed, said she knew I didn't mean to sound harsh, and still found a way to make it about Charlotte's good intentions. A few days later, I started hearing from coworkers that people were saying the nonprofit idea came from Charlotte's community vision. She'd apparently been telling people she had inspired me to take on meaningful work. It wasn't the first time she'd done it, but it was the first time it reached people I actually worked with. I noted everything quietly. My friend Maya noticed the pattern faster than I did. Over lunch, she mentioned how Charlotte always made herself sound like the reason behind anything I accomplished. When I thought about it, she was right. It was always we in Charlotte's stories, never Isabel. The next family gathering was a big barbecue at my parents' house. I kept my distance from Charlotte, but she found her way into the spotlight as always. Surrounded by cousins and family friends, she started telling everyone how proud she was that I'd finally acted on the talk we had about giving back. I watched people nod and smile, assuming the story was true. I didn't plan to respond, but when someone asked how that talk had led to the project, I just explained that it had started with a client brief and a proposal I'd developed months earlier. The conversation went still for a second. Charlotte forced a laugh and said I was too humble. Her tone didn't match her words. Dinner went on awkwardly after that. When I left, she messaged me accusing me of embarrassing her in front of everyone. I read it, closed the app, and didn't answer. Later that night, Mom called again, saying I should keep peace for the family's sake. I told her peace wasn't possible if truth kept being rewritten. By then I realized Charlotte wasn't going to stop. Correcting her privately only gave her a chance to twist things again later. I decided that next time she made up another version of my story, I wouldn't argue behind the scenes. I'd correct it calmly, publicly, and with proof. No emotion, no debate, just facts. The nonprofit project officially launched a few weeks later, and the results came faster than anyone expected. Local news covered it, small businesses tagged the campaign online, and my name was printed in the credits section. It was the first time I'd seen my work recognized publicly without someone else's version attached to it, at least for a few days. Then Charlotte found it. She reposted one of the articles on her social media with a long caption about how proud she was that I'd finally found my way into meaningful community work. She added that it had been a goal we'd shared for years. The comments filled up with people praising her for being a great influence. A few even congratulated her directly for mentoring me. That week, the nonprofit's PR manager emailed me to ask whether Charlotte was officially part of the team, since some sources seemed to suggest it. I sent over the documentation showing the official contributors, and clarified that the project was handled entirely through my firm. The manager apologized, but it was clear they'd seen Charlotte's posts. I didn't bother trying to make her delete them. Instead, I saved screenshots and continued working. But soon enough, it spilled offline again. At the next family dinner, Charlotte made a speech about helping others even when they don't appreciate it. She looked at me the whole time she spoke. The table went quiet, except for Mom, who smiled awkwardly and said she was proud of both her girls. I stayed quiet, but Dad's patience finally cracked. He asked Charlotte, in front of everyone, what exactly she thought she'd help me with. The silence that followed felt like the first honest moment our family had in months. Charlotte stammered something about emotional support, then left early. Mom scolded Dad after she left, saying he shouldn't have humiliated her. He just shook his head and said it was time someone asked. A few days later, another article came out about the campaign's success. This one was larger, regional instead of local. Charlotte reposted it again but added herself into the story, claiming she'd guided the values behind the project. That post reached one of my new clients, who asked if I was expanding into social advocacy consulting. I spent another afternoon fixing what she broke. 2 weeks later, I was invited to speak on a leadership panel about authenticity in marketing. It felt like a big step. I didn't tell Charlotte or my parents until the schedule went public, mostly because I knew she'd find out anyway. And she did. When the event's post went online, she started tagging herself under it, commenting things like so proud of my sister's journey into cause-based branding. The day of the event, I noticed her name on the guest list even though she hadn't been invited. She showed up halfway through, walking around as if she belonged there. During the break, she introduced herself to other attendees as the sister who inspired the program. A journalist covering the event recognized me and pulled me aside later. He quietly asked if that claim was true since Charlotte had implied she'd been part of the concept. I showed him my drafts, proposals, and time-stamped communication with the nonprofit. He nodded, thanked me, and said he'd be writing a follow-up article. When it came out, it included a line about how the initiative had been entirely designed and executed by Isabel Harper, whose approach to ethical marketing emphasizes accountability and transparency. There was no mention of Charlotte anywhere. That night, the family group chat was silent. Usually, Charlotte was the first to send something, some photo, quote, or message to reset the tone. This time, she said nothing. I thought maybe she'd stop after that, but a week later, she showed up at my apartment with coffee and a bright smile, talking about moving forward. I let her in out of politeness. She started telling me how hard it was being misunderstood, and that she never meant to overshadow anyone. I just listened, said I had a deadline, and walked her to the door. By the weekend, she was back online again, posting about how easy it is for people to twist good intentions. She didn't use names, but everyone knew who she meant. Mom called, telling me to ignore it, but I noticed even she sounded tired this time. At work, though, things kept improving. The project was nominated for a regional award, and the nonprofit asked me to lead another campaign. My manager congratulated me in front of the team. That same afternoon, one of my coworkers mentioned that Charlotte had posted a behind-the-scenes story saying she was so proud of what our conversation started. It was clear now that she wasn't going to stop trying to attach herself to my work, no matter how many quiet corrections I made. But something shifted after that journalist article. For the first time, her version of things didn't stick. People had seen the truth printed clearly, and there wasn't much she could do to rewrite it. When Dad visited me a week later, he handed me a clipping of the article he'd printed out. He said he kept it because it was the first time he'd seen my name on something public, without Charlotte's attached to it. I didn't say much, just thanked him. That evening, I opened my laptop and updated my folder, screenshots, emails, and now press coverage. Every piece of it mattered. Charlotte might still try to spin her stories, but the difference was that I didn't need to defend myself anymore. The facts could do it for me. And judging by her silence after that article, she knew it too. Weeks went by without a single word from Charlotte. Family dinners grew awkward. Mom made excuses about her being busy with work, while Dad stayed quiet through most of the meal. I knew silence wasn't retreat, it was regrouping. Charlotte never disappeared without reason. She paused to plan the next story. During that time, my career moved faster than it ever had. The success of the nonprofit campaign spread further than expected, and a national firm reached out asking if I'd consult on a regional marketing expansion. It was the kind of project that could open every door I'd been working toward for years. I accepted and kept my focus tight. For the first time in months, my name was circulating without Charlotte's attached to it. Then she showed up. One afternoon, my receptionist buzzed in to say my sister was in the lobby with flowers. When I stepped out, Charlotte was standing there, smiling like nothing had happened, holding a bright bouquet and greeting my staff by name. She talked loudly about being proud of me, about how we'd always believed in working hard for our dreams. My coworkers thought it was sweet. I thanked her, accepted the flowers, and walked her out before she could start wandering around. Later that week, one of my colleagues mentioned they'd heard Charlotte had motivated me to return to big projects after a hard time. The rumor had started circulating through shared contacts and clients. I realized she'd used that office visit to rebuild her image as part of my comeback story. I called my assistant the next morning and asked her to mark Charlotte as no walk-ins allowed. Any unannounced visitors were to be turned away, and all inquiries about me were to be routed directly through my email. It wasn't dramatic, it was protection. Mom called soon after, saying she'd heard Charlotte was trying to make peace and that I should meet her halfway. I told her boundaries weren't hostility, they were professionalism. She didn't like the phrasing, but I wasn't changing it. A few weeks later, I got news that I'd been nominated for a regional marketing award. It was a big deal in the industry and got some local press attention. The announcement alone drew attention from new clients. That's when Charlotte reappeared, again, at a charity function my company sponsored. She walked right up to my table where a few of my clients were seated. She laughed, hugged me, and introduced herself as the sister who pushed Isabel to aim higher. The clients looked confused but polite. I stood, thanked her for her encouragement, then clarified to everyone present that my achievements came from my professional mentors and team support. It was simple, calm, and final. The conversation shifted quickly after that, though the tension hung in the air. Later, a few people from that table quietly told me they admired how I'd handled it. They understood exactly what had happened without me having to explain. By the weekend, I found out Charlotte had told Mom that I'd made her look foolish in front of everyone. Mom sided with her, saying I could have ignored it and let it go. But Dad stepped in for once, telling her that what Charlotte was doing could damage my reputation. He told her privately that enough was enough. I didn't argue with either of them. Instead, I started expanding my records, notes, dates, and people who'd witnessed these little scenes. Every time she inserted herself into my work, I logged it. The more I reviewed the pattern, the clearer it became. This wasn't about jealousy or sabotage. Charlotte needed control, not just over how people saw her, but how they saw me. If my story existed without her in it, she lost part of her reflection. And if there was one thing Charlotte couldn't stand, it was being invisible. So I prepared quietly, waiting. Because the next time she tried to make herself part of my work again, I wouldn't just correct it, I'd be ready to dismantle it before it even began. When the Regional Marketing Awards came around, my name was announced as one of the winners. I brought my colleagues and my dad to the ceremony. Mom and Charlotte weren't invited. I didn't want any scenes, and I knew exactly how both of them could turn attention into chaos. The event was formal but warm, with industry people from all over the state. When my name was called, I went on stage and thanked my team, the clients, and my mentors. My speech focused on authenticity and accountability, how real progress comes from owning your narrative instead of borrowing someone else's. The words were deliberate. A few people who knew my background gave knowing smiles. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Charlotte. She congratulated me and added, "I'm proud you finally took my advice." I didn't answer. 2 days later, my phone started buzzing again, but this time it wasn't her. A few mutual contacts reached out, saying they'd heard that Charlotte had helped me overcome my self-doubt before the award. She had apparently been telling people that she had been coaching me through personal growth. She turned a professional win into a story about her being the emotional architect behind it. Then it crossed into my work again. A potential client emailed me asking to confirm the joint social work initiative Charlotte had mentioned when they met at a local networking event. I stared at the message for a while before replying. I sent a professional clarification, included links to my verified work, and explained there was no joint project. The client appreciated my quick response and confirmed they'd be proceeding directly with me. That night, Mom invited everyone over for a small dinner. I hadn't seen Charlotte since the award ceremony. She arrived dressed like she was attending another gala, full of smiles and stories. During the meal, she mentioned to everyone that she was glad she could connect me with that client. I didn't say a word, but Dad put his fork down and asked her what she meant. When she stumbled, he told her to stop inserting herself into my work. Mom tried to smooth things over by saying we should just drop it, but the point had already landed. Charlotte stood up, muttered that no one appreciated her support, and walked out. For the first time, Dad didn't go after her. The silence afterward said more than anything else could. Over the next week, I started hearing from relatives. A few of them admitted they'd noticed how Charlotte's help always came with her name front and center. The more people saw it, the less convincing her act became. At work, things evolved quickly too. My firm decided to assign a communications advisor to help manage public mentions and brand accuracy, since my name was becoming more visible. It was a professional move, but it doubled as a shield. Any misrepresentation could now be caught early and corrected before it spread. Then came the message from Charlotte. She texted me a long apology, saying she didn't mean to cause any PR confusion, then added, "But at least they're talking about you now." It was a backhanded apology wrapped in self-congratulation. I replied with one line, that my career and personal life needed to stay separate from now on. That same night, Dad called to tell me he'd had enough of defending her. He told Mom plainly that he wasn't going to cushion Charlotte's ego anymore. He said if she wanted to act like an adult, she could face consequences like one. It was the first time he had drawn a clear line. And something shifted after that. The family group chat stayed quiet, but no one pushed me to fix things anymore. A week later, an announcement went out that I'd been invited to speak at a national business conference about ethical storytelling and marketing. It was one of the biggest opportunities of my career so far. Within hours, Charlotte reposted the announcement with a caption about how family values always come full circle. I knew that tone, it meant she was getting ready to step into my spotlight again. But this time, I wasn't just prepared for it. I had every email, message, and post she'd ever twisted. And now I had professionals watching the narrative too. Whatever she tried next, it wouldn't just expose her intentions, it would leave her standing alone in a story she could no longer control. The national conference was the biggest event I'd ever spoken at. Months of planning, rehearsals, and media coordination went into it. My company made it clear that all press and attendee interactions had to go through their communications office. It was strict, but after what happened with Charlotte before, I understood why. When the event lineup went public, my name was featured alongside top executives and marketing directors. Within a few hours, Charlotte shared the announcement with a caption about how proud she was of her little sister for following in her footsteps. I ignored it. But soon after, one of the conference organizers forwarded me an email from someone claiming to be my advisor. The sender was Charlotte. She had introduced herself as my ethics consultant and asked to join the networking dinner. I replied through my company's PR manager, thanking the organizer for the heads up and explaining that Charlotte was not affiliated with any of my professional work. They removed her name from all lists immediately. I added the screenshots to my growing record. The day of the conference arrived. I was scheduled for an afternoon slot, and by the time I got to the venue, the crowd was larger than expected. My presentation covered ethical storytelling and marketing accountability, topics I'd been building my reputation on for years. The talk went smoothly, and the Q&A that followed had people asking about mentorship and client trust. It felt solid, focused, and completely mine. When I stepped off stage, I noticed Charlotte standing outside the hall, talking to two journalists. She was animated, smiling, pointing toward the room I'd just left. I caught pieces of her words, something about being part of the original development team for my outreach framework. The journalists were scribbling notes. I walked over calmly, greeted everyone, and thanked them for attending. Then I clarified that Charlotte wasn't associated with my firm or the project, but I appreciated her enthusiasm. The journalists exchanged quick glances and thanked us both before turning back to their notes. Charlotte's face froze for a second. That evening, one of those journalists published a short piece about the event. It praised my presentation and mentioned the importance of defining one's narrative amid outside noise. There was no reference to Charlotte, but everyone who had been there knew what that line meant. After that, the shift was immediate. People who once entertained Charlotte's claims started avoiding them. At networking events, when she tried to join conversations about my work, others changed the subject. She had burned her own credibility without realizing it. At home, the divide in the family deepened. Dad congratulated me again and told Mom he was proud of how I'd handled things professionally. Mom still tried to soften Charlotte's behavior, saying she just wanted to be included. I didn't argue, but I stopped attending dinners where Charlotte would be. I shared nothing about my projects, not even general updates. Anything I said became material for her next story. A few weeks later, a PR coordinator from another firm sent me screenshots of a community initiative Charlotte had announced online. The name and structure were almost identical to the corporate outreach program I designed the previous year. Even the graphics looked copied. The comments under her post were full of people congratulating her for carrying forward her sister's ideas. I didn't react. Instead, I forwarded everything to my company's legal department and waited. While they reviewed the materials, Charlotte continued posting updates about her new project, sharing identical phrasing from my presentation slides. She even gave an interview where she described the program as something she had helped develop for years. A week later, the company's attorney contacted her formally. The letter was professional but firm. It detailed every instance of copied language, structure, and design, and demanded that she remove all infringing content immediately. Within days, her website went offline. The posts disappeared one by one. No public statement followed. Professionally, the incident barely caused a ripple. If anything, it strengthened my position. Industry peers saw how calmly and cleanly it had been handled. Colleagues respected the way I kept emotion out of it. At the next family dinner, Mom tried to bring up the situation, saying Charlotte didn't mean any harm. Dad cut her off, saying that wasn't the point anymore. Charlotte sat quietly the entire time, eating in silence. When relatives congratulated me on the success of my recent campaigns, she didn't interrupt or add anything. She just smiled faintly, then changed the subject. I didn't gloat. There was nothing left to say. Everything had played out exactly as it was supposed to. Not because I exposed her, but because I let her expose herself. By the end of that year, my firm promoted me to lead strategist, and the nonprofit partnership that started it all became a national model. My name stood on its own. No extra voices, no borrowed light. Charlotte still came to family gatherings, polite but quiet. The spotlight she once fought for now stayed off her. I didn't need to reclaim my story anymore. It already belonged to me. About a month after the conference, people began tagging me in posts about a new community outreach program launched by Charlotte. The comments congratulated us both on working together again. When I opened the link, I froze for a moment, not because it was surprising, but because it was predictable. The name of her program was almost identical to mine. The logo looked like a cheaper version of the one my team designed. And the description? Entire paragraphs matched word for word from my own presentation slides. Even the layout, font choices, and case studies were copied. It wasn't inspiration anymore, it was replication. By the next day, a long-term partner called to congratulate me on expanding the brand with family. That's when I knew the confusion was spreading again. I clarified calmly that there was no joint venture and sent over documentation proving my campaign's official registration and ownership. The partner apologized and said they'd already suspected something wasn't right. A mutual contact who attended Charlotte's launch event sent me her slide deck. It was the same structure, same phrasing, and even the same closing slogan, just with her name on it. She hadn't even changed the sequence of examples. The more I looked at it, the clearer it became that she didn't just borrow from me, she built her entire project on my blueprint. Instead of calling her, I went straight to my company's legal department. The review didn't take long. They confirmed multiple instances of copyright and intellectual property infringement. The advice was simple: keep everything documented and let the process unfold formally. A few days later, Mom called. She said Charlotte was upset, that she felt left out of the legacy we could have built together. I told her originality wasn't exclusion. Copying someone's work wasn't collaboration. Mom tried to reason with me, but the conversation ended when I reminded her that Charlotte's actions had real-world consequences now. The next morning, I texted Charlotte and asked to meet at a quiet cafe near my office. She arrived cheerful, expecting a conversation she could control. I laid both projects side by side, mine and hers. The matching details were undeniable. Her expression tightened as she flipped the pages. She started explaining that she only borrowed my structure so she could spread the impact faster. She said I should be proud that she admired my work enough to use it. I told her pride and permission weren't the same thing. Then I informed her that my company would be sending her a formal notice. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. When Mom found out, she called it unnecessary. Dad disagreed. He told her this had gone far enough, that protecting my work wasn't cruelty, it was accountability. He said if Charlotte wanted to act like a professional, she needed to face professional consequences. The cease and desist letter was sent that week. It detailed every copied element and demanded immediate removal and clarification. Within days, Charlotte's website and promotional materials vanished. The launch announcement was deleted without explanation. The story traveled through local professional circles quickly, but not as gossip, just as acknowledgement. People discussed it quietly, noting how lines between inspiration and imitation could blur when ambition outran ethics. Her credibility faded almost overnight. For me, things only grew. The company used the incident as a teaching case in internal workshops about intellectual ownership. My project, the original one, expanded nationally within months. I was invited to mentor others on how to build transparent, accountable social initiatives, the same values Charlotte had tried to claim as her own. When the next family dinner came, I expected some tension, but the air was calm. Relatives congratulated me for the expansion, and even Mom kept her tone neutral. Charlotte was there, sitting across the table. She didn't interrupt. She didn't try to add herself into the story. She just listened. I thanked everyone for their kind words, then changed the subject. For the first time in years, there was no correction to make, no rumor to fix, no story to reclaim. The spotlight had moved back where it belonged, and this time, it stayed there.